Hello and welcome. I'm Dr. Chris Burke and this is Computer Science 1. This video we're going to be giving you a brief introduction to Git and using GitHub in particular. This is basically a walkthrough of Hack 1 in your first week of class. Just a few things to note before we get started here. Everything in these instructions is going to be specific to the VS Code IDE that we're using that's provided by the CS50 course. So there are some really weird workarounds that we've had to develop for this, but it is current as of the posting of this video. Now, if there are any changes in the future, look below for further instructions on what those changes are. So over here we have Hack 1. Before we get into that though, I wanted to walk you through a solution so that you don't have to keep changing your directory every single time you come into the VS Code IDE here. Remember, you can't use Git in your default directory, right? So after Lab 1, it should look something like this. And when you come into it, you're going to be in workspaces and then this random number that's been assigned to your workspace. If we try to use Git, right, we're in a repository managed by the CS50 course, and Git is disabled. Remember, we can't use Git inside this directory. That's why we created that CS1 directory outside, right? If we go ahead and list it over here in the directory one above, we see that CS1 directory that this is a symbolic link to right here. Okay, so the workaround that I found that I developed was that we'll just go ahead and put in what's called a configuration, a profile configuration, so that every time you come in, it will automatically change directories into that other directory. To do that, let's go ahead and create a file first. We'll just call it profile for now. Right? Now remember that that's not in the current directory. That is in the CS1 directory that is one above. So let's go ahead and CD into that. Now remember, I'm in workspaces CS1. If I do a PWD, that tells me what my current working directory is. So what we're going to do is we're going to add some commands here. I'm going to add one command to echo that we're going to be changing our directory. Right? Just so that it reminds us every time that we log in, we're actually changing the directories from the default directory. And then we're going to go ahead and have cd change directory into workspaces CS1. Right? I'm going to save that, or it's saved automatically. And I can see that profile file right here. Now it's not in the correct name and it's not in the correct spot. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to copy that file, cp copy profile into home ubuntu /.profile. Right? Now I'm not going to show it now, but every time you come back in, it should execute that script file there. Actually, I will show it to you. So let me go ahead and close this out. And I'll come back to Visual Studio Code, VS Code. And the next time you come in, you should see this. There's the message that we printed out, that we echoed, changing directory to the CS1 directory, and we're in there. So we're no longer in that directory that we can't do anything with it. Okay? So now let's go ahead and get started on the actual hack. You should read through everything, and of course you're going to want to set up some configuration here. I'll let you do that on your own since I've already done that. But let's go ahead and go into our hacks folder and create a new directory called hello. Right? So if I type ls, I can see that there are hacks, labs, and miscellaneous folder that I might have made in lab 1. Let's go ahead and change directory into hacks. Right? And remember that I am now in this hacks directory. Let's go ahead and create a directory called hello. We can do that make mkdir hello, or we can go up here and go new folder, or new folder right there. Right? I'm just going to go ahead and do it from the command line. And now we see that that hello folder is now there. If I expand this out, I see that it's there, but of course since there's nothing else in the hacks directory, it's going to collapse it just to save room. Okay? The next step is to actually create a repository. So we need to initialize it And to do that, we're going to use Git Init. Right? So let me go ahead and go into that hello directory. Right? Now, where am I? I am in Workspaces, CS1, Hacks, Hello. Right? That's where you should be. I'm going to go ahead and create a repository by using Git Init. Right? Now remember, before it didn't work because we were in that restricted directory, but we're no longer there, so now it should work. Right? And we get this message. Now that created a repository on our IDE over here in the VS Code. Right? Now it's being stored on Microsoft servers somewhere or something like that, but it is not on GitHub. You need to now create a repository on github.com. I'm going to come over here to github.com. I'm already logged in, and I'm going to come over here and create a new repository. My new repository will be named Hello. Make sure that it is public, that is as the default, so just don't change it. Right? And create a repository. There are a bunch of other bells and whistles that you can get look through on your own. For now, though, let's go ahead and just use the defaults. Now we need to go back to our IDE, and we need to make some. We need to add some things. All right. So for the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to create a new file here. Right? New file. I'll call it hello.c. This is and you can put whatever you want in here, but ultimately, let's go ahead and use what we used from Lab 1. I'm going to go ahead and fast type this. There. There's our basic Hello World program. I've added some things here where I'm putting my name and my major, just so that I have something different that I can see as I make changes. Now down here, we can see that hello.c file. I need to add it to Git to tell it, look, there's this new file. I want you to consider it for changes so that I can commit these changes. I've saved the file. The file is saved, but as far as the repo is concerned, the repository of code, it's just a file. It doesn't know anything about it yet. I'm going to add it to it. So git add all. Right? That's going to add every file. There's only one file in this case, but it's going to add every file in the current repository to its consideration. Right? Now that doesn't necessarily commit it. It doesn't necessarily do anything. It just knows about this file now. In fact, if I go git status, we'll look at this later again, we see that there's a new file here called hello.c. I'm going to go ahead and commit that change now. Git commit, and I need to put in a message, -m for a message. Now you should put in a descriptive message here describing what changes you've made with this commit, what features you've added, what bugs you've fixed, things like that. But since this is our first commit, I'm just going to go ahead and call it initial commit. I've surrounded that with single quotes there. Okay, and it says, great, there are 11 insertions, that's 11 lines, and there was this file that was created, hello.c. Following along here. Now, those changes have been created and committed again to our repository on the CS50 IDE, the VS Code IDE here. But they are not in our repository over here on github.com. If I go to it, I see an empty repository with nothing in it, right? In fact, it's just telling me you need to do some more stuff here, right? So what we're going to do is we're going to push stuff out, and we're going to push our changes here from the VS Code IDE over to the GitHub website. Now to do that, we need to do a couple of steps here. First of all, GitHub likes to call all their default branches main. Git itself likes the default name of master. So we need to make sure that these are compatible. So we're going to change master on our VS Code IDE into main. And to do that, we're just going to rename it, right? This git branch m main. That's renames your, it basically renames your branch. If we didn't do that, then we would have some sort of error message when we tried to go to the next step that said something like that master, I don't know anything about master, right? Now, before we continue, what we're going to have to do is create what's called a personal access token. GitHub security doesn't allow you, when you log into GitHub through the web page, of course you give it your password. It doesn't like you using your password for actually committing and working with files and working from the command line and stuff like that. They want you to use what's called a personal access token. And the full instructions for doing that are available here. I'm going to show it to you really quick by going over to GitHub. You need to be logged in, of course. So I'm going to go up here to Settings and over down here to Developer Settings and then Personal Access Tokens. Now I've already got an access token created, but if you need to generate a new one, simply generate a new token. You need to give the token a name, so I'm going to call mine Demo Token. Now you can have it to have no expiration, 7 days, custom 90 days. I'm just going to go ahead and make it so that it expires tomorrow, because I don't. You're going to actually see it in this demonstration, but I don't want you actually using it. It would be a security risk if you gave this token out to anybody else, and so you don't want them to have it. Make sure that you click Repo. Otherwise, basically what you're doing is you're giving it this personal access token permissions. And if you click repo, if you don't click anything, then you're not giving it any permissions. You're just generating a token, which is kind of useless. So make sure that you are clicking repo. Come down here to generate token. Right? And there it is. You can go ahead and copy it to your clipboard. I'm just going to go ahead and copy it over to a temporary space over here. Now what we need to do is we need to connect our local repository to the remote repository. Remember, our local repository is here sitting on the VS Code IDE, and our remote repository is going to be stored on GitHub servers. So I'm going to run the following command: git remote add origin, and then I'm going to have this URL here. Right? Now I'm going to have to replace login with my GitHub login. I'm going to have to replace token with the token that I just generated, and then again replace login with my GitHub login. If you named your repository anything other than lowercase HELLO, then you're going to have to replace that as well. All right, I did my typing off screen, and I'm going to just go ahead and cut and paste this so that I don't make any mistakes. There. Again, no news is good news when you're talking about Unix. Sometimes it'll tell you something succeeded, or it'll give you some results. But generally, if you have no results, you can assume that everything went well. Generally. Now we're going to actually push our changes to the remote repository. Git push -u origin main. And if it's successful, it should give us a message like this, that it pushed it out to that remote GitHub repository. And if I come over here to my repository and I refresh or I look at it again, we now see that hello.c file in there. There's the contents of that file, and we see that it was updated 7 minutes ago. That's when our commit was made, 7 minutes ago. Not necessarily 7 minutes ago in this video, though. It's been cut together. So I've also got some information here. If you messed up typing at any point, you can go ahead and fix that with these instructions. The next thing that we're going to do is add what's called a Git Ignore file. Now, when you've got a repository, you've got a bunch of code. That code is ultimately compiled. For example, so I'm going to come back over here. You'll note that I've fixed the program a little bit by I forgot to include my libraries here. But now if I go ahead and compile this, it produces an a.out file. That a.out file is an executable file that will run on the VS Code IDE only, on Ubuntu. I can't even necessarily take it over to a different version of Ubuntu and expect it to run, much less take it over to, say, a Windows machine or a different Unix machine entirely, or a Linux machine entirely. So that's not something I necessarily want to check in and commit to my repository. If I did, again, git status, it'll say that, well, hello.c has been modified. Also, there's an untracked file here. There's a new file, a.out. If you add it to the repository, commit it, and then push it, that a.out file will be on your GitHub repository. We don't want that. We just want the code. We don't necessarily want all the artifacts that are of the code, because you can always recompile the code. So what we're going to do is we're going to create a new file up here. I'm going to do it up here, called .gitignore. Right? Remember that dot is in the front of the file. It is absolutely essential. It's what's called a hidden file. and it's spelled Git Ignore, Ignore. Okay, and it's automatically opened up here so that I can start editing it. I'm going to tell anything that you put into this file, Git will end up ignoring. So I'm going to say ignore a.out. Right? Now if I look down here and I rerun that command, git status, right? Then we see that that a.out file is no longer there. It notices that new git ignore file, but the git ignore file is telling it to ignore that a.out file that we just created. Awesome. So now what we're going to want to do is we're going to want to commit these add these files, commit them, and then push them again. Anytime you make changes, substantial changes like this, then that's what you should do. Git add, and you can add individual files too. For example, if I wanted to have a different message for the hello.c, and commit it separately, because remember I screwed up that file. I didn't put the standard libraries into it. Fixed standard libraries, right? Library bug, right? I didn't have those libraries in there, these libraries, and so I fixed that bug, and now I've got a descriptive message. Right? There. Now if I go git status again, we see that hello.c is no longer part of that, but the git ignore file, we haven't added that and committed that yet. So let's do that now. Git add.git ignore, git commit with a message of added a git ignore file. There we go. Now you'll note that I haven't pushed either one of these commits. You can commit as many times as you want, and then finally, okay, now I'm ready. I'm going to push them all out. Git push u origin main. Right? Now you might see some instructions that say master because that's the default of Git. But we're working with GitHub here, which is not the same thing as Git, and its default that we changed it to is main. If I look at my repository over here after I refresh, I see now that git ignore file, and I see my message, fixed standard library bug here 1 minute ago. Okay. Now again, we've already run through making changes here. I made changes to hello.c. I've made changes by adding a new git ignore file, and I showed you git status as well. But another thing that you can do is use git diff. So for example, let me go ahead and add another message. Printf minor is Japanese. Maybe I've got a Japanese minor here. Now I've changed that file, and if I run git status again, I see that that file has been modified. But I forgot, how was that file actually modified? You can use git diff, and it'll list exactly what happened. We added, that's what this plus is in the green text here, we added that line to that file. If I removed a file, or for example, if I removed a line, or if I changed an individual line, I'll respell my name here. Right? And if I run that again, git diff, I can see that multiple lines have now been changed and added as well. Right? Let me go ahead and undo those so that I've got those two lines, but I still have that new line there. Right? So let's go ahead and add that, git add. Again, you can use all to add every single file, or you can be more intentional about it and add hello.c. Commit with a message, added my minor, and push. And again, we see the changes over here. There's my minor now. So now for this last part, we're actually going to collaborate with the team. That's the whole point of Git. It's a distributed version control system where you can work with hundreds or thousands of other people without stepping on each other's toes. And each one of you can works with an entirely different copy of the repository with a complete history. Sometimes you have to merge things together. Sometimes you have conflicts between your partner's changes and your changes. We're going to keep it simple here and show you how to collaborate with one other person and just get you an introduction to it. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to add somebody as a collaborator on this repository on GitHub. To do that, go up to Settings, collaborators, and then add people. I'm working on a separate account here. You'll search for them by their GitHub login ID. So when you'll need to partner up with somebody in the class or outside of the class and send them an invite to this repository. Now the way that that looks from your partner's perspective is if they go to your repository, right, they'll get an email with an invite, but if they don't want to wait, you can go ahead and go to their repository and you'll see this view invitation. Go ahead and accept the invitation. Right? And now you've got two collaborators, right? You've got two collaborators on this repository. Now what we're going to do is we're going to have your partner make changes to the repository and push them out to your repository so that they can, so that you can collaborate, right? If you both are collaborators on this one repository, you can each make changes and you can also pull changes. So we're going to walk through that step-by-step process. So I've got a separate browser open over here with me, my partner logged in. So I've got a separate VS Code instance over here in which my partner has logged in. And you can see that I've got a bunch of stuff in here already. Let's just go ahead and go into our hacks folder here. Right? And let's go into hack. I've already created a folder named hacks 1.0. And let's go ahead and what we're going to do is what we're going to, it doesn't matter what's in there already. What we want is to get a copy of our partner's repository here, right, with this URL. And I want to grab a copy of that. To do that, I'm going to clone it. And this is what you did with Lab 1, or you clone stuff from my repository. Git clone. Let me go ahead and increase the sizes here. Git clone. And then you give it the URL of your repository. Right? And when I do that, all of the files have been now copied from that remote directory, or that remote repository, into my local file system here. You'll see that there's that hello folder right there. If I expand it out up here, right, there's that hello.c file. Let's go ahead and open it and see the contents that we just created prior to this demo. I'm going to go ahead and go into that folder, and again we see it right there. If we go ahead and compile it, I can compile it and run it. Okay. So now, as a partner, what I'm going to do is I'm going to add my information. I'm pretending my partner is Grace Hopper, and I'll put in that our majors are computer science. We'll go ahead and leave the minor there. Right? Now we can do the same tricks as before. Get status. Right? We can see that we changed that hello.c file. We can go ahead and commit those changes after we've added that file. All right. Now we can't necessarily push it out to the remote repository here. In fact, if I tried, I'm going to get an access denied message because I'm not using my access token. So now what you have to do is your partner, of course, has already created a personal access token because they went through the exact same process before. And so what you're going to want to do is you're going to want to set that access token using the following command. So there it is, but things need to be replaced. So the partner login here is going to be your partner's login. Your partner's token is right here. Don't give your token to your partner, and your partner shouldn't be giving their token to you. And finally, your login should be replaced here because it is actually your repository, not your partner's repository on GitHub. So this is the partner login, this is the partner token, and your login. So be careful, those are three different things. I'm going to go ahead and cut and paste all of those. I didn't show that because I am using my personal access token there and I've cut it. but now I'm able to push stuff as the partner, Grace Hopper, say. I was able to push stuff using Grace Hopper's login, Grace Hopper's token, but your original login for the URL. Okay. Now let's take a look and see what that looks like over here on the GitHub page. When I refresh this, I see that I added my major to, that is, Grace Hopper added her major, and we see the changes reflected here. In fact, we can look at the commit history here. This is all the work that we've done this afternoon. We've had our initial commit, we've fixed a standard library bug, we added a Git Ignore file, we added my major and then added my major too, right? And we can go into each single one of those and see what the differences were, right? We can see that we added this line right here, and then we removed this line here, right? And replaced it with our majors, our computer science. Now to finish up and actually hand this in, you're going to want to take your URL, right? Place it into a README file. So let's just go ahead and create a new file here called readme.md. MD is short for Markdown. This is just a plain text file. You can put whatever you want into it. I'm going to put the URL into this, and I'm going to go ahead and hand this in. Remember that you can download files by right-clicking on it, selecting download. And I've downloaded it here. There's the README file with the URL in there, and that's what I would end up handing in. Right? If you are teaming up with a partner and turning in one copy, of course you would want both URLs there. So it would look something like that. Post to the course forum if you have any questions. Otherwise, good luck.